Hello everyone and welcome to Defenders. I'm Avanne Dubash. I'm here in Talegaon at the Strategic Systems Complex of L&T, which is the place where all the production as well as the prototype of the defense equipment systems are made. Today I'm in conversation with none other than Mr. Jayant Patil, who is actually the member of the Executive Committee as well as Advisor, Defense and Smart Technologies to the CEO and MD of Larsen & Toubro. Thank you so much, sir, for taking time out.
Welcome to my Strategic Systems Complex.
Yes, and we're in the midst of this greenery and this lovely state-of-the-art facility. Mr. Patil, I want to just start off by understanding that here we are. Here is where all the prototypes as well as the productions of the defense equipment manufacturing takes place. Can you just walk us through that process? What is over here around us?
In fact, this campus is the first completely defense manufacturing facility that came up in the country. So this was absolutely the first private sector defense factory. We decided at this place we will build bulk of the major systems which need to be part of our core. So whole lot of electronics, the software that goes in, and the assembly, integration and testing of complete equipment. That's what we do at SSC. Now SSC obviously began from the day you started doing design and development. Now the first of the weapon which is incidentally inducted with the Indian Army from anywhere in the private sector, also as much for DRDO, is what you see at the back.
Oh, wow.
So this is Pinaka weapon system.
Yeah.
Now Pinaka weapon system obviously took a good amount of time to develop, but this is in production since about 2006. So more or less this factory was set up for some of these weapon systems, and that's how it actually began.
So this is clearly where all the action happens at
Right
this facility,
from the first
manufacturing, testing, all of that takes place at this facility.
Except
right?
the weapon firing, we do entire testing here.
Thank God, so I feel safe. Now I just want to understand the defense industry as a whole, because it's at an inflection point or at a very sweet spot at a time like this. There's been a huge thrust on indigenization by the government and it's poised for very rapid growth. Do you see us at that inflection point right now?
I see it at an, I would say the inflection point is slightly behind us. We are now into real action. For us, this is a sector we invested in very heavily in the mid-80s.
Right.
So we were not allowed to produce anything. We could only do research and we could collaborate with defense research. So what you see all around me today, and that's exactly what has been put up here, is bulk of the weapon systems that have been developed by Larsen & Toubro along with defense research. So the Pinaka was the first example. Now this is essentially where those days when the private sector was not allowed to play its role in the defense, that's the time this work actually began. After the sector opened, we all know 2001, 2002 it was licensed, and from that licensing point, by about 2014, we have truly a scenario where the government was willing to listen to industry, make ways so that they can actually be brought in a very big way. Now 2015 to 2022, if I look at these 7 years, budgets of capital equipment have doubled. The indigenous percentage of our budget has also doubled. What it means is the actual allocation of money has become 4 times. And that's precisely why I say it's not just an inflection, it's into action now. Because inflection, I would say about 2017-18 it truly happened. Today it's very volume orders which actually are coming into private sector. And we can only start looking at the whole thing becoming much larger, because more and more I see coming in the form of the negative lists for import.
Right.
So we call them the positive indigenization list.
Yeah.
Along with the positive indigenization list, very large allocations which I mentioned. Today about 1 lakh crore per year is getting bought from different private as well as public industry.
Sure.
And the private sector's share out of it typically is about 25,000 crore. So we are a major player, obviously the largest in private sector.
Yeah.
And that's essentially where we see the sector moving up. Currently, if I look at, more than 4.5 lakh crores have actually been decided by the government that it will be bought from Indian companies.
Right.
So those who are ready Typically someone who spent 35, 40 years in the sector as Larsen Toubro, we see this to be bringing in very, very large volumes as the time passes. And that's essentially where the action, this was, as I said, the first factory. We set up multiple thereafter.
Of course. And you know, just let's talk about L&T in specific with defense. 14,000 crores in terms of the total order book contribution, which is about 3.7% of the, or 3.8% of the 3.7 lakh crore major order book. What is going to be the potential in terms of the order book for defense in the next 1 year, in the next 3-5 years, and will the percentage contribution increase to revenue?
The percentage contribution certainly will increase. As Larsen Toubro, we have, let's say about 8-10% we can expect out of the defense alone.
By when?
And typically I expect about 2 to 3 years, then that should happen.
Sure.
Within this year, we see the percentage starting to dramatically increase. When I say this year, there's always one rider with Ministry of Defense. The March can always become June, a quarter here or there in terms of our processes. Because it's a public money being spent. There's enormous amount of, call it checks and balances as part of the system. And that's for good, because at least last many years, we have not heard any scams in defense. Yes. And that's essentially where it takes time, but at the same time, it's a market which truly rewards. And being a sunshine sector, virtually nothing less than 10,000 crores were coming private sector way.
So how do you see the order book growing from 14,000 in defense?
I see certainly at overall L&T level, you mentioned about Larsen Toubro's order book in terms of very large volumes. Now that itself, by itself will grow. Because we typically go about 10 to between 10 and 15% year on year, and today our base being 3.75 lakh crore will increase. Now defense will outgrow that rate of growth. That's all is the current indication.
So 15 to 20%?
Probably even larger but that's essentially where you may not get all of them year on year in a sustained basis.
Sure.
Defense always tends to be crests and hills, and that's essentially where some amount of, I would say, orders flow in a cluster, and some obviously will be years, like typically a year before election. 6 months to 9 months after an election remains always a lull time. And normally it's your order book which sustains you through.
Right. You know, there has been a robust order inflow as well for L&T within the defense sector. Walk us through some of the recent major orders that you bagged, and what can we expect on the anvil?
In fact, some of the absolute major ones which are just about to be getting into the order book right this year. What you see around is whole lot. But besides that, I would say the 2 classes of warships that we recently won, and one of them we already signed a contract, second we are about to be signing a contract. We have the bridging equipment, entire army bridging equipment, irrespective of whether it's a small 5-meter bridge or to a 75-meter bridge, is all made by Larsen Toubro, designed and developed here. Now this is essentially where you start seeing the bridging equipment when we see a contract beyond 2,000 crores. So these are something. This year we also see some extremely high power long range radars. You see one somewhere there. And that's essentially where you start getting into now extremely high value add to completely shut what India used to import some years back. So weapons today, this factory alone produces about 40 types, different types. We then moved into radars, we moved into warships, we moved into submarines, and for each of these segments, we see major orders. We see the K9 Vajra repeating this year.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, the K9 Vajra. What is the update on the additional order for that, the battleship management systems, Pinaka, etc.? What is the update on some of those?
Pinaka right now is in the order book. We are executing. Obviously, there will be one more repeat of Pinaka, but probably, to my mind, should not be within next 1.5 years. It probably will be thereafter.
Okay.
But there's something very wonderful which we did in last 2.5 years. And as a part of that, we call it the close-in weapon system. Okay. And we named it very aptly Sudarshan. Okay. So it's the Lord Krishna's kind of a weapon which can do anything, because it's a it's in a way mythological, but to that sense, you can throw it and it will destroy anything and come back.
Right.
Now in our case, of course, a close-in weapon system was inclusive of right from radars to command control to guns, and a full-fledged system, we actually won that contract. So it's in now yet to get into order book, about to get into at some point in time by the time the financial year unfolds. But those are orders which obviously one can expect in a very, very quick time and quite large. Now order sizes are now growing.
What's the average order size now?
Typically today, as I said, the modular bridge is little more than 2,000. We'll see the close-in weapon system to be more than 6 to 7,000.
Okay.
And that's an indication.
So where will you close your order book by year end for defense?
As I said, for this year, when I always say the March can become June, but we probably should be at least doubling from where we are.
From the current 14,000 to about 28,000.
14,000.
Fair enough. When it comes to India looking at a lot of export opportunity as well with artillery systems, military equipment, etc. What about exports as a contribution of your overall revenues, and how do you see it?
Today in defense, whatever we do, about 10% is typically in the form of exports. 90% is for our armed forces.
Right.
And primarily, the business was started primarily to look at our own armed forces to become, as Modi ji talked about, being Atmanirbhar.
Yes.
So we were one of the part of that Atmanirbhar story. Before the Prime Minister articulated it, we created that Atmanirbhar. What you see around, you won't find any foreign equipment which with a transfer of technology has come here. That's essentially where Larsen & Toubro's relationship with defense research becomes important. It's nearly, as I said, 3.5–4 decades of work. As a result, across systems, complete platforms on one side, we today have a factory which builds battle tanks. We have a factory to build warships, submarines. We do military communications, we do radars, we do all weapons for the army as well as Air Force and Navy.
And you know, the company focuses a lot on smart technology and digital driven focus. Can you just walk us through how you plan to capitalize on that within the defense space?
In fact, the smart technologies are always part of any defense, because every of this equipment that you see around have what is called the main controllers and the embedded software that goes into it. Now the entire embedded aspect, which is called the embedded intelligence, the embedded intelligence is embedded by us indigenously.
Yes.
And that's essentially where the concept of smart and completely digital. Defense turned completely digital, I must tell you, exactly 3 decades back. It was 92, we turned digital. We decided to take this into the other markets. Today about 27 Indian cities are smart because of the smart cities business of Larsen & Toubro.
Wanted to know the update when it comes to, with Garden Reach shipbuilders, there were some warships, and what is happening with respect to Mazgaon dock as well, because there was a potential submarine order, 45,000 crore rupees. I believe there's been some delays on that front. Could you walk us through the latest on both these?
On the GRSC ships, in fact, you touched a very important point, Avanne, and the history of this program is it was competitive. We had lost it.
Okay.
GRSC actually won 2 major contracts. One they won on their own, second they won along with Cochin Shipyard. Since they didn't have a capacity, it was extremely mature dialogue, because for decades of relationship that we enjoy with GRSC as a customer. So the CMD of GRSC at that point in time was Admiral VK Saxena. VK Saxena and me got talking, saying that he said, I don't have capacity. I said, my yard is khali. And that's
So
exactly
that's how
where
you
we
came
created
together.
an amazing PPP.
Right.
So this PPP model, truly we believe that that's the way to go for in future, where irrespective of who invested into a facility, Larsen & Toubro invested or the government of India invested, each of these facilities today can produce for each other. Now the ship which we launched is actually the first of the ASW corvette.
Okay.
Of course we built 3 more ships for them before, but this is the 4th one, another 3. So we are going to be building 7 ships for GRSC.
Okay.
On the submarine program, you very rightly mentioned again, it's a very, very large order, probably a lifetime single largest order
Yes.
one can probably expect. And of course, order sizes will keep going up in future. This is a 43,000 crore as per its clearance value. Of course, the time is passing. As time passes, the cost keeps getting built up because inflation keeps happening. The rupee dollar scenario will make it more expensive. But the submarines are in pipeline on a firm path. There's further extension that had to come. Obviously, some issues with respect to the tender.
So
and
any
they are
update
getting
as
addressed.
to, okay.
We expect about another 7-8 months
Okay.
it to be at a stage where the bids would have happened.
Welcome back. I'm at Talegaon at the Strategic Systems Complex in conversation with Mr. J.D. Patil of L&T Defence. So, Mr. Patil, we were discussing orders, etc. But when it comes to defence, also there seem to be some problems or concerns when it comes to delays, procedural processes. Have you been witnessing that, or have you seen a lot of those issues ironed out?
I think it needs some amount of conditioning to get into defense market. It does tend to be very, very slow, and all of us who are long timers believe that the pace comes in more because of the responsibility that we are a democracy. Anybody can ask any question.
Right.
And I think that's essentially where we know that what possibly can happen in a year takes 3.
Right.
And that's the pace at which things happen.
Are you worried about, newer players, newer private players as well entering the space? Would that impact profitability in any sense?
For Larsen & Toubro, obviously, we take competition very seriously because anyone who's not in a protected market would need to be so. Fact is, we believe that the future is all about doing things here, the Atmanirbhar,
Right.
what the Prime Minister talks. Larsen & Toubro's DNA is in Atmanirbhar because when the company was founded, it started that day. World War came in, the founders had nothing to do except doing things on their own, and that became the psyche of our organization, that we still do things, a lot of them our own way. Now it makes a huge difference in competitive game. The CIWS that I talked of, the close-in weapon system, we had an Indian solution, indigenous IP, indigenous know-how, and obviously we are L1. So when a foreigner brings in knowledge, obviously the foreigner in that case charges you for the knowledge, and that's essentially becomes a part of the cost. So if you are on a long-term focus, you need to have your own capabilities, and that to that extent, at least for some period, we believe Larsen & Toubro will have a differentiator.
Right.
If others start investing, we are one of the largest investors in R&D. I started my career in R&D, and that's essentially where this is what actually keeps us ahead of most, because what you see in terms of the breadth at a place of this nature, or for that matter across my 7 manufacturing locations, this is not something which today most in the industry can talk of.
Right.
Now that's essentially where serious segment wise, but overall we are in a differentiated position, more because of doing things our own way.
What about entering, drone manufacturing? Is that something that you would look at with the government looking at a ban of import of drones?
In fact, when we talk of drones, bit misunderstood word, the mini and micro will not get in. It's highly crowded market, and probably the entire that segment of market is Chinese imports.
Right.
While we are looking at extremely large drones, and that's what I said, the unmanned segment, whether it's an underwater mini submarine, it's still called a drone.
Okay.
So the entirety of that is where today Larsen & Toubro is putting on enormous amount
Large
of our own R&D,
drones as
our
well?
own money, very, very large drones,
Okay.
which can stay for like 3 days, 5 days, 7 days in air.
Is there an investment? What's the investment that's being made for this?
Today we put in typically about 15% of what we actually get at beyond EBITDA. I mean just the cash earnings.
Okay.
We put them in R&D.
And what kind of growth do you foresee here?
We see that this is something which has been year on year going higher, and the demand, obviously because of multiple segments of market that we run, the demand for R&D is always there.
Okay.
Now you start stretching your mind in terms of what is needed. I'll give few examples. One of the weapon system that we saw around, there was a requirement to create a quick reaction weapon.
Right.
So the quick reaction weapon system was created in 13 months.
Right.
Now that's essentially where you leverage your knowledge, past knowledge, some of it you reuse, repackage. The recent one is a light tank.
Okay.
Now 2020, before that, we are not so active about the Northeast. But today Northeast requires equipment, and we never bought equipment for high altitude, low temperature.
Okay.
So a lot of Indian Army's focus today is getting on to high altitude, low temperature warfare, and that's essentially where the light tank becomes important. Need was never felt. The Chinese brought a tank there, 35 tonner. All our tanks are 50 tons and above. Obviously a tank need to be created.
Okay.
And that's essentially where we got into a fundamental R&D and that part.
Sure.
We are creating on one of our own.
Right. Would you look at, becoming, look at aircraft integration?
Aircraft, we decided as a company that since the overall demand in India for fighter aircrafts is much smaller, and government in the past always had all orders only with one organization, we are happy being the major tier 1.
Okay.
The largest tier 1 of HAL is Larsen & Toubro. We do the wings, we do lots of avionics for LCA as well as varieties of aircrafts.
Right.
And that's a segment. We decided that we are happy being the tier 1.
And I understand that there are about 7 facilities. The initial investment for that was about 8,000 crore rupees.
Absolutely.
What is it looking to grow at? What is the investment in these facilities?
Currently, my belief is for the volume which we do per year basis, we are
Which is what?
over-invested. Typically about 4,000.
Okay.
And that's essentially where we actually are over-invested.
Okay.
Our capacity utilization across factories today, we could do more.
So what is it currently at, your capacity utilization?
Typically a place like Talegaon, it's almost 70-80%.
Okay.
But Hazira, there's much more we could do.
Okay.
Kadupalli, we are not even 10%.
So a lot of the capacities are currently being underutilized.
Underutilized.
What about margins that you enjoy in the defense business? Where do they stand at?
The EBITDA margins, obviously we publicly talk about it because the segment we used to report, they stay far better than what Larsen & Toubro otherwise earns.
So currently
So
at?
we are happy.
So currently at?
Double digits, obviously.
Okay. And how do you look to grow? It'll be in double digits?
It will stay there, but I don't expect percentage margins to be going up for a reason. When you give a capability to a nation, you don't price it.
Right.
We know that when it was getting imported, it was far higher prices. We are happy actually granting that capability to the nation much at a affordable kind of a cost. In terms of quality, we certainly would want to do much better, and that we have proven through our track record, but it's at a much lower price point.
What about procurement, more PLI schemes that are required in the sector? Are you seeing execution on ground that has improved for defense?
It certainly has improved because first thing that fuels it is the orders.
Right.
As I said, from literally less than 35,000 crores a year that the industry had fallen to, from there to about 1 lakh crore per year for Indian industry is a sizable increase. Now, in addition to that, certainly something like a PLI would make a difference because today sustenance of an industry, if one has to look at, it will do well if some of these initiatives actually happen.
Right.
In terms of taking it overseas, till 2016, India never had an export policy. It came in, and we know today we are 13,000 crores of export. And I must also say that nearly 90%, 92 to be precise, is from private sector. Small industry, big industry, all of us put together are putting good amount of effort.
Right.
Now this is not what till 3 years back was Government of India giving to the industry. So the export sales today are larger than what Government of India was buying from private sector 3 years back.
Got it.
Today, from private sector, government buys 25%. That's nearly 25,000 crores, and on top of that 13,000 crores is an export. So it's improving, it's growing.